expected.
Hello and welcome. I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. Iran and the United States hold a third round of indirect nuclear talks in Geneva as Washington builds up forces in the Middle East. Both sides say they want diplomacy but warn they will respond if the other resorts to military action. Russia launches a wave of missile and drone attacks across Ukraine, wounding at least 8 people ahead of high-level talks between Kyiv and Washington to end the war. Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton are set to appear before the House Oversight Committee in its investigation into the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The depositions are scheduled to take place in Chappaqua, New York, where the couple reside. Cuba's Interior Ministry says Border Patrol forces engage in a shootout with a US speedboat, killing 4 people. Authorities say the vessel carries a Florida license plate with the US state located about 145 kilometers from the island. South Korea and the UAE sign a defense cooperation MOU worth more than $35 billion, according to Seoul's presidential envoy. President Lee Jae-myung's chief of staff says the projects cover air defense as well as air force and naval capabilities. Hong Kong media tycoon Jimmy Lai wins an appeal overturning his 2022 fraud conviction, with the court quashing the guilty verdict and sentence. The ruling comes days after he was jailed on separate national security charges and he remains in custody. The USS Gerald R. Ford departs Crete after a supply stop as President Donald Trump sends the carrier strike group to the Middle East. The move comes amid a broader US military buildup as Washington weighs possible action against Iran. Russia questions how President Donald Trump's proposed board of peace would coexist with the United Nations Security Council, saying the UN remains the only recognized global authority on peace and security. Those are the headlines for the hour, but we start in the Middle East. And India and Israel have reaffirmed their commitment to standing together against terrorism. During his visit to Israel, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized the shared stance on combating terrorism, stating that both nations are clear in their opposition to it and its supporters. One key development is the agreement to integrate India's UPI system into Israel, enhancing financial connectivity between the two countries. Prime Minister Modi also dedicated the Speaker of the Knesset medal to the people of India, marking a strong bond between the two nations. Several pacts were signed in areas like innovation and agriculture. Both leaders spoke of a forthcoming India-Israel free trade agreement, which is expected to strengthen bilateral ties. The talks also focused on defense, security, technology and agriculture, with discussions on the Middle East situation and collaborative projects like the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor and the I2U2 framework. Joining us now is Major General Sudhakar G, a senior geopolitical and strategic defense expert, joining us live from Jaipur. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, it is a great pleasure. Of course, India is a key partner to Israel. However, India also balances these ties with all these Gulf states, some in the Abraham Accords and some not in the Abraham Accords. Of course, India is the world's third largest economy now, fourth largest economy. Why does India need Israel? Due to the possible tensions it might cause with its Gulf partners after this visit?
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Thomas. You're right when you said India is the third largest economy by purchasing power parity. It is the third largest, and fourth as far as the nominal GDP is concerned by nominal value. India needs Israel for many reasons, but one central reason is that first and foremost thing is that both the countries are getting closer to each other. They're the pillars of strength in the global dynamics today in this huge geopolitical churn because of one common challenge, that is terrorism. Both the countries have gone through the grind. Israel is still passing through the journey. India has had almost about more than 30 years of experience having gone through this ignominy of terrorist nuanced violence, and it brings both the nations together. I would say that is the first point. Second thing, actually the global order is undergoing very serious rapid changes. When I said the rapid changes, the existing global apex organization and the architecture of governance is based on transatlantic relationship. That unfortunately is getting fractured, very seriously fractured. With the fracture of the transatlantic relationship, what is happening is the biggest victim in world order today is one factor, that is trust. The trust as it is, there was a lack of trust earlier, but this lack of trust has intensified. Within the West itself, when you talk about the global North, people are not in talking terms, they don't trust each other, to live alone, leading the global order from the front. So therefore, what it brings is you require some country which has got the experience of countering the terrorism. Israel as a country, it is of the size of 400 kilometers by 140 kilometers, north, south and west, east. When you compare the size country with India, which is 3,200 kilometers north, south to 3,000, almost same, west to east, well, Israel would be looking for something and India also is looking for some opportunities. So common challenges, common opportunities is actually bringing both the nations together. What we want in Israel, Israel may not be wanting the same thing in India, but it requires something else. The biggest requirement, talking from the perspective of national interest of India, is the technology transfer. That is the need of the hour. The agriculture sector, technological innovations, the critical minerals, critical technology. Here is a country which is offering the technology transfer without any strings attached. What happens tomorrow, neither you nor I can say anything, but as on today, both the countries, they enjoy a high degree of trust. They enjoy the needing each other for different purposes to meet their national interest. They also are shaping the global order towards some degree of predictability and certainty by bringing in peace and by bringing in security in the area and bringing safety to their respective people. The defense production line, which is available today in Israel, is built on the paradigm of almost 6% of the GDP in research and development. Here is an eye-opening kind of a factor that India has to draw a lesson from. India has got a R&D of 0.65%. So without actually digressing into all such issues, I personally feel here is one small tiny country which is surrounded by forces inimical to its existence. It has got existential threat. Here is India, which is a huge geographical mass with geostrategic importance, yet it is surrounded by smaller countries with forces inimical to its existence. So therefore, by virtue of the existential threat to both the countries and the superiority of the defense armament which Israel has got today, and with very heavy investment into the research and development, the technological advancement, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, you name it. So India has got a lot to actually earn and learn and from Israel, and Israel has got a lot to depend on in India for the sake of humanity, peace and security.
Yes, Major General Sadakaji, do stay with us as we turn now over to our next story. where the Kremlin expressed concern on Thursday about the escalating situation in Cuba, urging restraint following a deadly incident involving a Florida-registered speedboat off the island's coast. Tensions are rising after the Cuban Coast Guard exchanged fire with the boat, resulting in fatalities. The incident, which took place on Wednesday, on the 25th of February, saw a group of exiles sail into Cuban waters and open fire on a Cuban patrol. Cuban forces responded, killing reportedly 4 of the exiles and wounding 6 others. The Cuban Border Patrol commander was also injured in the exchange. Russia's Foreign Ministry spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, has accused the United States of intentionally escalating the situation with the goal of triggering a conflict. Moreover, the Cuban government has called the incident a direct attack on their territorial sovereignty, while Russia supports Cuba's position, viewing the US actions as a part of a larger pattern of aggression in the region. Joining us once again is Major General Sadaka G on this story. Both countries, of course, Cuba and Russia, continue to face sanctions from the West. How does this continue to unite them, especially in situations like this?
Well, we need to understand Cuba's crisis that is unfolding or panning out from the context of what is happening in Venezuela, in the Caribbean Sea, and a couple of months back, what happened in Cuban waters. Post-Tomahawk missiles having been sanctioned for Ukraine, there was an agreement between Russia and Cuba, and that agreement was called as Defense Peace Agreement. One of the central themes of the Defense Peace Agreement, way back in March 2025, was that Cuban soil could be used by Russian missiles and the weapon platforms for offensive purposes. This was a kind of a turning point which perhaps to my mind the mainstream media world over have missed, or they have actually ignored it as an insignificant development. But for me, as a student of geopolitics, this became a turning point as far as the American security is concerned. So with that, they started the National Security Strategy of 2025, and they have stated openly the new paradigms of giving a loose rope, contrary to earlier stance of USA, to Russia, to China. China has been told to do anything they wish to, but they could go ahead with reunification of Taiwan peacefully, but they have been warned not to do anything across Atlantic. Russia has been indicated it will be reinstated back into the mainstream geopolitical ecosystem of the leading economies. It would be restored back to its G8. Why am I saying all this is that to understand the Cuban crisis, it has to be understood from the larger perspective that it was almost close to a 1962 Cuban crisis in the month of March, April, when the naval vessels of Russian Navy started appearing in the Cuban water. So that was a wake-up call. From that perspective, we also need to understand that the Cuban economy is it's tottering with a very high inflation rate of almost 31%, high debt to GDP ratio of 120%, and they have almost about 850, they have 2.4 million Cubans who have migrated to USA for different types of situation and contingency. There is a high deficit spending as of today. There is high rates of immigration. There is like the GDP is just about $107.35 billion. So under these circumstances, Cuba as on today does not have regular and predictable fuels of fossil oil supply. Out of 24 hours, almost 18 to 20 hours are in darkness. Hospitals are not running, schools are not functional, and transportation system has come to a grinding halt. So all these things, and mind you, America had already gone in for occupation of a couple of islands in Cuba in the past. Guantanamo, that prison that America is holding today, that is one of the issues. They are actually driven by the sentiments and emotion of Platt Agreement, which was signed long time back in early 20th century. That did not last too long. In 1934, it was actually lifted. But what I'm saying is, it is a strategic rivalry in the backyard of America, which America is sensitive of. They need to give pushback not only to Russians but to the Hezbollahs they are present there. Chinese have penetrated into 4,150 islands. They have got listening or eavesdropping technology.
Yes.
They are actually monitoring all military activities which are taking place in America, in the Caribbean, and the Cuban. So under these circumstances, America is absolutely charged up to give a pushback and restore its dominance in Cuban island.
Okay. Major General G, do stay with us one last time as we turn over to our next story. But first, we have some breaking news coming in. The World Economic Forum co-chairs have confirmed that Brande is stepping down from his role as the president and CEO of the World Economic Forum. This comes in the wake of his resignation. Alois Zygwini will serve as interim president and CEO. The WEF also revealed that an independent review conducted outside counsel into Brande's contacts with Jeffrey Epstein has concluded with no new findings emerging from the investigation. Furthermore, there are no additional concerns beyond what has already been disclosed regarding Borge Brande's departure. Another Epstein-related sacking there. We now turned over to West Asia. And Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian has stated that the Islamic Republic is not at all seeking a nuclear weapon. This comes as talks with the United States in Switzerland begin today in a final attempt to avoid war. The talks, mediated by Oman, follow a massive US military buildup in the region, with US President Donald Trump threatening military action if a deal is not reached. Pezeshkian referred to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei's statement that Iran will not pursue nuclear weapons. While Iran insists that the talks will focus only on its nuclear program, the US wants to curtail Tehran's missile program and support for militant groups. This comes after a massive protest movement in Iran, which rights groups claim saw thousands killed as demonstrators called for the end of the Islamic Republic. Let's in fact listen in to the Iranian president.
گفته که ایران باید اعلام بکنه ما سلاح هسته‌ای نخواهیم داشت. اینو که ما مقام معظم رهبری اینو فرموده ما اصلا سلاح هسته‌ای نخواهیم داشت. رهبر یه جامعه، رهبر دینی یه جامعه دروغ بگه. وقتی ایشون اعلام میکنه ما سلاح هسته‌ای نخواهیم داشت یعنی نخواهیم داشت. منم اگه بخوام به اون طرف برم نمیتونم داشته باشم از نظر اعتقادی. حق ندارم، حتی تو ذهن من باشه حق ندارم.
Major General Sudhakar G joins us once again here. All eyes are on Geneva today with these US-Iranian talks, which are going ahead. A third round. This could be seen as extremely consequential as that US military buildup continues in the Gulf of Arabia. Do you have any positivity going into these talks today, Major General G, or do you think that military action is inevitable here?
Yeah, I think a day prior, Thomas, you and me were discussing about a positive turn of events. We were very optimistic that this particular meeting in Geneva would be yielding some kind of a positive outcome, but it seems that nothing is working out. And Iran, rightfully, mindful of the fact that it's a civilizational country, no country worth its salt is expected to compromise its national sovereignty by accepting the demands of the United States to include lowering or descaling the enrichment of uranium to non-weapon capability, and also cutting off the budget allocation funds and armaments to the proxies, Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Hadil al-Saif in Iraq, and other militia groups. And third, and most important, is to some sections say they're limiting the range of the ballistic missile. But today I heard Marco Rubio saying that cutting off, abandoning the entire missile arsenal. Will any country worth its salt and worth its self-esteem ever give away on a platter the defense capability? I don't think so. The kind of the challenges which Iran has been subjected to from 1979 till date, I think it's the only country which has been imposed with maximum sanctions, economic, diplomatic, military, all kinds of sanctions have been imposed. Despite that, here is a country which has made its defense capability formidable. Under these circumstances, I don't think Iran is going to accept all this. However, it will do good to Donald Trump and his interlocutors to go on with the peace talk, not to actually,
Okay, Major General Satakaji, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time there. We will turn on to our next story and we head over to Latin America, where Venezuela's long-serving Attorney General Tarek William Saab has resigned after nearly 9 years in office and been appointed as the country's acting ombudsman, lawyers have said. The move was approved by the ruling party-dominated National Assembly following the resignation of the previous ombudsman, leaving Saab to temporarily oversee human rights affairs. Saab's tenure as prosecutor has drawn criticism from human rights groups who have accused him of playing a role in politically motivated arrests and rights violations. Parliament President Jorge Rodriguez defended the appointment, praising Saab's experience in human rights. A committee is expected to be formed to select a permanent ombudsman and attorney general as the country moves towards institutional change. Let's listen in. We now will slip into a short break. Apologies there.